What's up, everybody? Corey Hughes, Bloody History. We're going to continue on today with some more Jack Ruby files. So, if you have made it through all of these Jack Ruby episodes, congratulate yourselves because you've made it through around 500 pages of Jack Ruby documents. Now, what are we learning from these Jack Ruby documents? Well, off the top of your head, you might say not much. Right, and that would kind of be true, but at the same time, what we're learning about is some of the aspects of Jack Ruby's background about people who knew him, who didn't know that he was associated with mobsters. Right, so we had in the last episode we talked about one person who knew him in Chicago, knew him when he was a kid, knew that he was friends with Lenny Patrick, who was a hoodlum, but didn't associate Jack Ruby with being a hoodlum. So. Interesting, right? We get little tidbits that he went to San Francisco and that he sold, he scalped tickets, right? And he sold punchboard. I don't even know what the fuck a punchboard is. He sold some punchboard thing with some other guy, right? And he worked with his brothers, Sam and Earl, at Earl Products, but he was unreliable, and so they bought him out of his shares, right? So what does that tell us about the relationship between Jack and Samuel Ruby? That Samuel Ruby is the responsible one, right? How much you want to bet that Samuel Ruby is the brains behind Jack Ruby? So one thing we have to remember about Samuel is that he got to Dallas about a year and a half before the assassination. Maybe a little longer, maybe a year and, 8 months or 10 months or, it might have been, but it's in that range somewhere. And nobody talks about this fucking guy that there are allegedly no photos of, right? Oh my God. So where I got the picture of Jack and Samuel Ruby came from a fucking Kennedy documentary. I don't even remember which one. I'll recognize the guy's voice if I heard it again. But I don't remember. It was not Dark Journalist. That guy hadn't solved nothing. He ain't fucking guy knows nothing. It wasn't, let me think. God damn it. I can't recall. But anyway. The narrator is going over a bunch of stuff about Jack Ruby. And he shows this picture of Jack and Samuel Ruby. And he doesn't even know anything about Samuel Ruby. He just shows it because it has a picture. It's got Jack in it. But a split second I saw it. I knew exactly what the fuck it was. Exactly what it was. Obviously, Jack and his little brother Samuel, who's about 11 months younger, right? So, as soon as I saw the picture, I knew it was Samuel Ruby. And then everything made sense. All the photographs of allegedly Jack Ruby, who weren't Jack Ruby, taken on the 24th. And in fact, the Jack Ruby made it on TV like 4 times in a day. Why the fuck would Jack Ruby make it on TV 4 times in a 24-hour period? And not even talking about this shooting of Oswald, right? We got him on camera everywhere. It's unbelievable how many times we have him on fucking camera on November 22nd, and that night at the press conference, and in the hallway, and at the Dallas Morning News, right? He's fucking everywhere. But that was Samuel Ruby, because Jack Ruby went to Galveston to take Andrew Blackman back to his boat. Yep. So, while it's on my mind, irrelevant to the rest of the show, Jim, if you could pull anything you can find on an alleged ship that possibly is the ship that Blackman came in on called the Mataranga, spelling unknown. I remember an article about the Mataranga that was on one of the JFK forums from years ago, and it was pretty convincing that these guys had positively identified the ship that had come in, the private vessel. They didn't connect it to Blackman, though, which is ironic. How often is that the case in the JFK research community? They're like almost there, like they're fucking touching it, right? They got the tip in, right? That's as far as they ever go. But yeah, Jim, find everything on the Mataranga, a ship allegedly either merchant marine or other private vessel that was in Galveston Harbor the weekend of the 20th through like the 24th or 5th or something like that. Yeah, through the 25th. The 20th to the 25th is when it would have been in Galveston Harbor. But I think I might have read that it hit Galveston Harbor and then it left and returned to pick up the guys who got off, right? It had a couple days to do some things around the bay or something along those lines. This is all vague in my memory, but something along these lines. But I think it's very important that we finally put this issue to rest. And the reason that's important is because Jack Ruby's the one who drove Blackman back to the boat, right? Nobody else has seemingly put together the series of events that Jack Ruby did while Samuel Ruby was impersonating him all over Dallas that weekend, right? So let us continue with these documents. November 28th, 63, to the director and SACs of Dallas and Chicago from SAC Los Angeles. This one's interesting because it says reference Jack Leon Ruby. We got the little circle indicating a name missing once again. So whenever you see this in a document, because this came up in my private research chat, if you have a name and then a comma, and then it says AKA period, and then it moves on to other names. Like in this case, it says Jack Leon Ruby, comma, AKA period, Leon Harvey Oswald dash victim period. Okay, these are two different sentences. And so when you have Jack Leon Ruby, comma, AKA, what that means is, in their shorthand, is Jack Leon Ruby and all of his known aliases, right? It's instead of saying Ruby and all of his known aliases, they just put comma, AKA, period. But what I found interesting about this sentence is that it identifies a Leon Harvey Oswald dash victim. That you don't see very often. You don't see the Leon Oswald. I'm going to screenshot this because it seems like it might be relevant at some point in the future. But it says Leon Harvey Oswald. I'm sure it's just a mistake, typo, sleight of hand, Freudian slip, something along those lines. Chicago tell the Bureau, Los Angeles and Dallas, November 25 instant. On November 25 instant, Louis Schnitz, underlined, 10484 Wyton, W-Y-T-O-N Drive, West Los Angeles, California, advises he does not know Ruby or Ira Kolitz, C-O-L-I-T-Z. Ruby's true name and aliases are unfamiliar to him. Schnitz said Schnitz, left Chicago in 1942 and was in the shoe business there. He knew of no other Louis Schnitz in addition to his cousin at Evanston. See how many dead ends there are? Tons of dead ends. Leads that went nowhere. Paid for by your tax dollars. 11/26/63 from the SAC in Memphis to SAC Dallas and Director of FBI, Jack Leon Ruby. Read the Phoenix teletype to the Bureau, Memphis and Salt Lake City, 25th instant. So the word instant gets thrown around a lot. It means immediate. This one right here, it can refer to dates, it can refer to times, it can refer to anything indicating that whatever it's referring to is the one that happened now or most recently, not the one from last week. Files of Memphis Division reflect that. Redacted. White male, 5'11", 235 pounds. That's all redacted here. So let me see if I can't sort through some of these notes here, because you have a redaction, and you have above it, it says gambler, right? And it says files of Memphis Division reflect that redacted gambler. And then it starts to have a date. The birth date must be in here, but it seems to be redacted. There's a 4, a comma, and then 1919. So if we were to find a Memphis-related gambler whose birthday was in April of 1919, or who was born on the 4th of some month of 1919. White male, 5'11" tall, 235 pounds, last known to be living in redacted Mississippi. We're a self-admitted bootlegger. So we got some clues there. In 1956, redacted came back to redacted, claiming to have been working in western or northwestern states, including Utah, and had purchased 2 trucks from some construction company, possibly in Utah. Based on above, there's no indication redacted could be identical with Jack Leon Ruby. Next one, 12/163. Jack Leon Ruby, again with the circle between Leon and Ruby, right above it. That's all over the Jack Valenti file. To me, it indicates that a name is missing or unclarified. Re-Bureau phone call to Los Angeles this date. Interviews of persons present at Dallas police basement. See how these are just kind of scattered around between background, biographical, and investigative, right? So as we go through these in your mind, try to determine how you would classify these, right? So if we're out interviewing someone who knew Jack Ruby in 1942 in Chicago, that would be completely biographical, right? When we're talking about interviewing people who may have seen Ruby in the basement of the police department, that is completely criminal investigative, right? So these documents, they have different, there's different headings that you could place these under, and that becomes really important when you're doing research to understand the category that your documents fall under. And if you can tag them in your mind, then you can always know where to go back to them. But which is kind of what I do. I can kind of tag everything in my mind and remember where it is and go back to it when I need it, as opposed to printing stuff and tagging it and whatnot. All right, what is this one? Re-Bureau phone call to Los Angeles this date. Interviews of persons present at Dallas police basement. So the first two sentences are completely fucking redacted. And it says, advised S.A. Joseph R. Conlon, November 30, instant, as follows. It was necessary to show press pass or identification upon entering Dallas police building. Before entering Dallas police building, before ascending each flight of stairs, and in so doing at arrival on each floor at police building in Dallas. Redacted confided he was not physically present when Oswald was shot in basement of police building and was not in position to say if unauthorized persons were present or persons were present without proper identification. Redacted said he had written story of circumstances of Oswald's shooting as if he had been there to give prestige to paper for which he works. Only redacted on paper is aware of this fact. Hold on a second. What? All right, so interviews of person present at Dallas police basement. So this person whose name is redacted from this record, okay? It says it was necessary to show a press pass for identification upon entering Dallas police building, before entering Dallas police building, before ascending each flight of stairs, and in doing so at arrival on each floor at police building in Dallas. Redacted confided he was not physically present when Oswald was shot in the basement of police building and was not in position to say if unauthorized persons were present or persons present without proper identification. Redacted said he had written a story of circumstances of Oswald's shooting as if he had been there to give prestige to the paper for which he works. Only redacted on paper is aware of this fact. Oh my God. So this is a typical journalist, right? Redacted said he was having breakfast at his father's home in Dallas when Oswald was shot. Redacted requested Bureau not divulge this fact to anyone, as he only admitted this because of his deep admiration for the Bureau and its work. Redacted did not talk to Ruby between November 22 and 24 last, and is not aware that Ruby or Oswald knew one another or that there was any connection of any type between them. His impressions of circumstances of Oswald's shooting was not obtained, and he said the first time he saw Ruby was during a police interrogation on the third floor of the building when Ruby was taken to a restroom. In view of fact, Redacted specifically requested the info he furnished be kept confidential. Los Angeles will furnish Dallas inserts for administrative pages. Aha, liar got busted, right? Liar got completely busted. All right, next one dated 12/163. Director, Attention, Civil Rights Section, and SAC Dallas. From SAC Miami. Read Dallas, tell 11/30/63. Milt Sosin, reporter, Miami Daily News, interviewed today by phone at his request by S.A. Robert K. Lewis. He related the following. On 11/24 last, he and other reporters proceeded from third floor Dallas Municipal Building to basement to observe transfer of prisoner Oswald. Numerous police officers from several organizations were in basement, and they carefully examined press cards, Department of Defense cards, and other identifying cards carried by members of press. He describes the security as very good and says his DOD card checked several times by officers. Sosin, being a stranger in Dallas, was not acquainted with everyone and does not know of any unauthorized persons present other than Ruby. Says apparently police were so used to seeing Ruby, he was accepted as a belonger or, quote, part of the scenery, unquote. Never talked with Ruby and has no knowledge of any conspiracy between Ruby and the police. Does not believe there was any association between Ruby and Oswald, as Ruby apparently was practically berserk over Kennedy's death. Next one, 12/163. Hitting Jack Leon Ruby, again with the circle, indicating a name is missing. Heading civil rights, Reed Butel called to New York, 11-30-63. Investigation to determine persons present at Dallas PD when Oswald was shot. W. Thomas Pettit, NBC News correspondent, home address 20405 Tiara Street, Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, California, interviewed New York City, furnished the following information. No special credentials were issued to him by Dallas PD, and he was not required to wear any identification. Pettit first entered the basement of Dallas PD at 9 a.m., 11-24-63, and was in and out of the basement several times prior to the shooting. 2 uniformed Dallas PD officers were stationed on a ramp at some time. A police sergeant was with them. These officers sometimes requested him to show identification and sometimes did not. His credentials were never thoroughly checked. There were also other uniformed officers in the basement. He does not know of any unauthorized persons permitted to enter the basement. He does not know of any unauthorized persons being permitted to enter the basement without showing identification on the day of the shooting. Following persons were in basement at time of shooting. John McCullough, reporter for the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Evening Bulletin. Jimmy Turner, reporter for, I can't read that, something Fort Worth. Homer, last name unknown, technician for WBAP Fort Worth, who was working behind the live camera. Looks like unknown film cameraman who claimed to work for Shreveport, Louisiana TV station, whose name can be secured from Don Roberts, NBC Los Angeles. Unknown reporter for a New York City radio station who had a microphone and a tape recorder, described as the loudmouth radio man from New York. Robert Huffaker, looks like, Huffaker. Newsman, KRLD, Dallas, Texas. Gene LAR, possibly NES, Larness, NBC News, cameraman. Took movies of Oswald coming out of the elevator, who can be contacted through NBC Los Angeles. Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas PD, who seemed to remain at scene in basement for several minutes after the shooting. First name unknown Lavelle, detective Dallas PD. PT Dean, patrolman Dallas PD. Deputy Chief Stevenson, head of Criminal Investigation Division. There's something written there, but I can't really tell what it says. It looks like it says police dead something. Police dead TE. I can't read that. Unknown captain of Dallas PD, dressed in plain clothes, who walked in front of Oswald and behind Fritz. Unknown detective, Dallas PD, about 27 to 28 years old. Close-cropped hair, who was standing just opposite Pettit at the time of the shooting. Police Chief Curry, who was in the basement shortly before the shooting and might have been there at the time of the shooting. Several uniformed officers of Dallas PD armed with riot guns. Pettit had no indication that any person conspired with Ruby or that any police officer or other official conspired with Ruby or willfully permitted the killing of Oswald. Pettit did not see or talk to Ruby on November 22, 23, or 24 last. Pettit does not know Ruby or Oswald or any connection between the two. Pettit was told that Ruby was seen in the office of Dallas County day or afternoon of November 22. Pettit was told that Ruby was seen in the office of Dallas County on the day of the afternoon of November 22 after the president was shot. Pettit said he could not say who gave him this information, but indicated that it came from employees of WBAP TV Dallas, and he suggested that Charles Murphy and James Kerr, Kerr, reporters for WBAP TV Dallas, be contacted for further details concerning this fact. Pettit noted that almost simultaneously with the shooting, a car parked on the ramp behind the armored car backed rapidly down the ramp and came to a stop with a screeching of brakes at the butt of the ramp. Ooh, I got to screenshot this because this is good stuff. Pettit believes this was a police car, but he's not sure, and he does not know who was driving this incident. And the report that Ruby was in Dallas County something office supplied with fact that Dallas police officer detective I can't read that detective on TV interview said that he knew man who shot Oswald and would have ejected him are only things which caused Pettit to speculate that a conspiracy existed to kill Oswald. Interesting. Pettit. What's Pettit's first name? I believe this man's statement is very relevant. I'm going to have to look for more information on this reporter named Pettit, Pettit. All right. To Mr. Belmont from A. Rosen, subject, Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, victim, civil rights, November 25th, 63. This is a different format, so this is definitely an FBI memo. 9:20 a.m. on this date, an individual identifying himself only as a Mr. Miller, 1125 14th Street Northwest, contacted the Bureau and advised that he was a close friend of Ruby. In addition, he identified Clint Murchison and Tommy Webb as being friends of Ruby. Miller declined to furnish additional information, but agreed to interview. Washington field office was immediately advised, and an agent was dispatched in order to get full details concerning above. I can't really read these notes, but I think it says press rigorously. I would surmise his Clint Murchison Jr., not Sr. They think it's talking about Clint Murchison Jr., not Sr., which would have a big impact on the relevance. Memorandum, November 25th, 63, to Mr. Belmont from A. Rosen, subject Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, victim, civil rights, 9:20 a.m. This date, an individual identifying himself only as Mr. Miller, 1125 14th Street, Northwest Washington, D.C., called and advised he was a close friend of Ruby. He also identified Clint Murchison and Tommy Webb as friends of Ruby. Miller declined to furnish additional information. Subsequent to the receipt of the call, agents of the Washington field office contacted the landlady at the aforementioned address, as well as individuals in the area, in an attempt to identify Miller without success. The Washington field office was instructed to locate Tommy Webb and interview him regarding information furnished by Miller. At 9:10 p.m., instant date. See, there it is again, instant date. So instant date means today, this date, instant date. Night Supervisor Leonard Webster, Washington field office, advised the Bureau that Webb had been contacted and advised that he did not know Miller nor Ruby, and was positive that Murchison did not know either Miller or Ruby. It was Webb's opinion that this was obviously a crank complaint. Action in view of the fact there appears to be no foundation in fact for Miller's statements. No further action is being taken regarding this matter. Then the notes at the bottom say, I think we should talk to Clint Murchison Jr. 1125-63. Reference Jack Leon Ruby. a.k.a. Jack Rubenstein, Lee Harvey Oswald, a.k.a. Alec J. Heidel, O.H. Lee - victim - deceased, civil rights, Dallas. Re-bureau teletype to all SACs today. Joseph Rossi, ROSSI, guest at the El Jardin Hotel, Brownsville, Texas, white male, apparent Jewish descent. Thanks for letting us know. Age 55, 5 foot 4 inches, 185 pounds, hair gray, balding, self-described as going into business in the nightclub venture in Austin, Texas with Jack Rubenstein, being interviewed by bureau agents at the hotel. Dallas advised San Antonio if questions to be put to Rossi, who indicates cooperation. Rossi's being contacted by the local press. $11.25.63 to the director, FBI and SAC Dallas from SAC Little Rock. Jack Leon Ruby, etc., etc. Re-bureau tel today. Oh, you slacker. You're supposed to say bureau tel instant. Hubert Dane Harris, principal owner, Vapors Club, a nightclub and gambling establishment, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Advised Rubenstein is unknown to him and stated that Jerry Rosenberg, a gambler from Dallas, Texas, who was formerly employed in the casino and at the Vapors Club, is possibly acquainted with Rubenstein. He stated if Rubenstein has ever frequented Hot Springs, Rosenberg would have knowledge of his activity in this area and possibly in Dallas. Rosenberg presently resides in Dallas, is employed in Dallas by the Flamingo Club and Las Vegas, and he normally frequents the Variety Club at the Holiday Inn in Dallas each afternoon, where he plays gin rummy with the other individuals. So that Rosenberg would cooperate, Harris suggested that he be informed. S.A. Claiborne T. White discussed the matter with Harris, and Harris suggested Rosenberg be contacted. Dallas to be advised. Next one, memorandum, November 25th, 1963, to Mr. Moore from C.D. DeLoach. Subject, assassination of the president. For the director's information, I talked with Al Friendly, Vice President and Managing Editor of the Washington Post and Times Herald at 10:50 a.m. this morning. I told Friendly that I wanted to be perfectly honest with him. However, I must insist that our conversation remain completely off the record. I mentioned we had had numerous cordial arguments in the past, and the fact was well established that we usually had different points of view on most matters. I mentioned that the purpose of my call, however, was a matter of grave concern, and I felt he would recognize this fact. Friendly agreed and stated our conversation would be maintained strictly in confidence. I told Friendly that apparently there had been a leak to his paper to the effect that a presidential commission had been suggested to look into the assassination of President and murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. I mentioned we had received information indicating his paper planned to prepare an editorial strictly affirming the necessity of a presidential commission. It was mentioned that such an editorial would be most unwise at the present time. Friendly interrupted me at this point and stated he did not personally know whether this had been a leak or merely the idea of one of their staff members. He affirmed the fact an editorial was being considered. I told Friendly I had just conferred with the director regarding this matter and wanted him to know that such an editorial on the part of his newspaper would merely muddy the waters and would create further confusion and hysteria. Oh, looks like here we got something like the origins of the censorship industrial complex playing out here, right? It was mentioned that the president had personally asked the director to have the FBI conduct a full investigation both into the assassination of the president and into the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. I told him Mr. Hoover was personally supervising these investigations and that reports would be submitted to the Department of Justice and to the White House in 2 phases. 1, the assassination of the president, and 2, the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. I mentioned that Mr. Hoover had seen to it that the best trained men in the FBI were on these investigations and that our inquiries were proving to be swift and intensive. I told him no stone is to be left unturned. I further told him that the president had additionally discussed this matter with the director today and that the director had assured the president that thorough investigations were proceeding at full speed. I mentioned to Friendly that our investigation would include and lay to rest any rumors of substance that had been flying around with respect to the 2 matters. Mentioned to him also the fact that the state of Texas was concerned with the matter and was conducting inquiry. I told Friendly that, as a matter of personal interest to him, our investigation into the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald would determine the adequacy of security given to Oswald, and that the facts, regardless of what they might be, would allow the Department of Justice to determine whether a civil rights violation had occurred. Friendly replied he was most interested in this phase. I mentioned to Friendly that, considering all the above, an editorial by his paper suggesting a presidential commission would merely serve to confuse the issue. I told him it was hoped that he would understand our viewpoint in this matter and would therefore eliminate the editorial. Without any hesitation, Friendly told me the editorial would be eliminated. He stated he would, of course, have to mention this matter to Russ Wiggins, the editor, on a confidential basis. I told him there would be no objections to this. However, Wiggins should specifically understand my reasoning in approaching him, Friendly, in this manner. Friendly stated there would be no misunderstanding. Friendly added that while he would respect our viewpoint, he sincerely hoped I would bring to the director's attention the need for some outstanding group or body of men affirming and issuing the FBI report other than the U.S. Attorney General or that boob, Wagoner Carr, who calls himself the Attorney General of the state of Texas. Friendly mentioned he had every confidence in the director and the FBI in conducting a fair and impartial investigation. He added, however, if the FBI investigative report was issued by either the Attorney General of the United States or the Attorney General of the state of Texas, the report would bear little weight in later suppressing rumors, ill-advising books making a martyr out of Oswald. I told Friendly that in view of his cooperation, I would, of course, bring his personal thoughts to the attention of the director, and I felt sure that the director would mention this to the president if the occasion arose. Friendly reiterated his confidence in the FBI and stated he was glad to be of service. The director was advised of the above facts and specifically of Friendly's commitment not to print the editorial. Friendly called back at 11:30 a.m. He stated he had thought the matter over. He obviously had talked with Russ Wiggins and wanted to let me know that while he agreed with some of our viewpoints, he could not make any definite commitment. He stated this was a matter for Wiggins to decide. I told him in view of his statements during our previous conversation, I thought the decision had already been made not to publish the editorial. He stated that he had only his personal opinion, that after all, the paper had an obligation to the general public. I told him I was not asking him to suppress anything, but merely to listen to a point of common sense during a very trying time. He stated this was all very true, but we should recognize that his paper had an obligation to print what was felt might be the best for the general public. He indicated that no decision had yet been made concerning the editorial, and in all probabilities it would not be printed. However, he did want to let me know, as of this time, no definite commitment could be given. This, of course, is the usual hogwash on the part of Wiggins, who cannot be trusted and usually attempts to run opposite of good judgment in order to satisfy his own ego. I like his own ego. The director was advised immediately of the above facts. I went over to see Gutham at 12:05 p.m. Gutham was told that apparently there had been a leak to the Washington Post and Times-Herald in connection with the presidential commission idea. I asked if he knew how this had come about. He replied that Jim Clayton, a reporter for the Washington Post, had contacted him this morning and had referred to an article in today's issue of the New York Times by James Scotty Reston, which specifically recommended a presidential commission. Column attached. Clayton asked for a comment from the Department of Justice, and Guthman told him he had no comment to make, that the FBI was apparently conducting an intense investigation, and nothing could be said until the FBI investigation had been completed. Deputy Attorney General Katzenbach was at Guthman's office at the time of my conversation with Guthman. After hearing our conversation, Katzenbach asked my opinion as to whether he should personally call Russ Wiggins. I told him it was entirely up to him. I asked him how well he knew Wiggins. He stated he hardly knew him at all. I outlined briefly to Katzenbach the results of my conversation with Al Friendly, the managing editor. Katzenbach stated he knew he could not trust Wiggins, but he would give him a call. Katzenbach called Wiggins at approximately 12:20 p.m. He told Wiggins he felt that all the facts should be, of course, made available to the public, but the Department of Justice seriously hoped that the Washington Post would not encourage any specific means or instrument by which these should be made available to the public. Wiggins stated he, of course, could make no commitment not to write an editorial, however, that the conversation that the FBI representative had previously had with Friendly, the managing editor, had merit to it, and he was inclined to go along. He stated he would give the matter serious consideration. action, this matter will be followed closely. So this is an interesting one because this is like, it gives an insight into what the FBI was doing. This is before the days of middlemen like Elon Musk and Twitter or X or whatever the fuck it's called, right? Instead of trying to go to X and have X suppress the story, they went directly. I'm sure in the modern day they go to everybody to try to suppress the story, but they found out about the story before it came out, and so they went to Wiggins, the publisher of the Washington Post. This is before Jeff Bezos, obviously. So Al Friendly seems to be a sellout, and Wiggins is a sellout too. They're all fucking sellouts. And so it seems as though the FBI, I don't know if it was ever released, you know. Let's see if it continues and lets us know. Probably won't, but it's interesting to get a look into how the censorship industrial complex worked way back then, right? Urgent, 11/26/63, from the SAC New York to SACs in Dallas and LA. Jack Ruby, a.k.a. the R.V. Oswald, a.k.a. Reed Butel, New York, Chicago, Dallas. 11/25/63. There's a whole bunch of lines of the various tells this is referencing. Tells or communications. Associates of Ruby. Celebrity Service, New York City, has no information concerning Judy Jacobs. Review of files of New York office failed to disclose any information reflecting a Morris Adelman, who was Communist Party organizer in Chicago area during the World War II, or who is relative of Midred McAdory Edelman. Barney Ross, former prize fighter, New York City, on 11/25/63, advised as follows. He's known Ruby as Sparky Rubenstein since about 1927, as Ross and Ruby grew up in the same area of 24th Ward, Chicago, Illinois. Ruby used to hang around Lawndale Restaurant in Chicago, which Ross frequented. Ruby also was usually present when Ross boxed as an amateur and later as a professional. Ruby was never on Ross's payroll and never borrowed money from Ross. Ruby did not have any employment but acted as a freelance salesman selling small items of jewelry. Ruby had telephonically contacted Ross several times a year over the past 10 or 12 years from Dallas, Texas. Purpose of these calls was attempts made by Ruby to secure talent for Ruby's club in Dallas, as Ross is associated with a talent agency in New York City. Ross last heard from Ruby telephonically about 3 months ago. Ross never did secure any talent for Ruby. Ross last met Ruby accidentally about 2 years ago in Chicago. Ross described Ruby as well-behaved, quiet individual who was never a troublemaker, never involved with any law enforcement agency, and never involved in any subversive activities. Background: investigation New York office reflects Jack Ruby giving address 223 South Ewing and Carousel Club, Dallas, Texas, checked into the New York Hilton Hotel 10:59 p.m. August 4 last and departed 4:40 p.m. August 6 last. Ruby told registration clerk he was in New York City to look for talent for his club in Dallas. Interview of other hotel employees concerning purpose of Ruby's visit to New York City negative. While at hotel, Ruby made following long-distance telephone calls. Los Angeles, area code 213-523-0930. August 4 last, and 2 calls to area code 213-274-0043, August 4 and 5 last. Dallas, 2 calls to area code 214-747-2362. A bunch of more calls that I want to go through. And then Bureau requested. Oh, here's a call to Canada, Fort Williams, Canada area. I don't know where that is. Area code 807-275-4891. He called Canada, Fort Williams, Canada. I wonder what was going on in Fort Williams, Canada in the months leading up to the assassination. Bureau requested to have Legat Ottawa identify a subscriber to last number and interview same regarding Ruby. Dallas and Los Angeles handle leads in your division. New York office attempting to establish Ruby's mode of departure through hotel. Records, autostats of hotel records being forwarded to Dallas via Airtel. Interesting, right? 11/26/63. To the director in SAC Dallas from SAC San Francisco. Jack Leon Ruby, etc., etc. Possible travel of Ruby. Whole first sentence and a half is redacted. San Francisco taxi driver volunteered. Signed statement that within the past 2 weeks, probably Wednesday, November 20 last, at approximately 11 p.m. to 12 midnight, he picked up a fare in his cab with no luggage at the Greyhound Bus Depot, 7th and Mission Street, San Francisco. Fare was a white male, age 45 to 50, short and stocky, clothing not recalled. Fare sat in front seat with him and asked to go to Eddy and Jones Streets, then changed to Ellis and Jones Street, San Francisco, which are 1 block apart and 8 blocks from the depot. Fare asked cabbie, quote, "How do you like President Kennedy?" unquote. Then some general conversation not about President Kennedy ensued. Fare then stated, quote, "My name is Jack Ruby." And he said he was going back to Dallas and was a nightclub owner in Texas. Fare then told cabbie he would read about him, unquote. "My name is Jack Ruby," unquote, and repeated several times. During the conversation, Fare then said he was either going to shoot or kill somebody, exact terminology not recalled. And as if redacted was not paying enough attention to him, Fare asked him, quote, "What's my name?" unquote. Cabbie stated, "Jack Ruby. That's what you've been saying." Fare left taxi at the corner of Ellis and Jones Street, paid fare, and was last seen walking around behind the cab. Cabbie claimed he was scared and upset from conversation and believes he erased from way bill partial entry for this trip. Original way bill for November 20 last shows possible erasure. Starting place, although previous way bill entry is from 7th Street. Cabbie claims trip definitely would have occurred between November 15 and 21 last, with days off November 18 and 19. Specific trip on way bill cannot be found. Cabbie claimed Fare had mentioned being familiar with San Francisco, but gave no specifics and did not indicate reason for cab trip. Cabbie observed photograph in local San Francisco newspaper of Ruby and unable to identify by photo, but believes would recognize his voice if heard again. Redacted appears lucid, is married, and has been a cabbie in the San Francisco Bay Area and Los Angeles for over 30 years. Has minor police record, no felony convictions. Was subject of a TGP violation, 46, dismissed, no grounds. Advised of provisions, blah, 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 a bunch of nothing important. Dallas advised if any indication Ruby's recently been in San Francisco. That's a good question. On November 20th, well, not the 18th or 19th, but it could have been the 15th, 16th, or 17th, right? Or the 21st. Doubtful it was the 21st. It was not. Could it have been the 20th? What was going on the 20th? You got the Rose Sheremy incident on the 20th. You have Jack Ruby in Dallas where he's meeting with Jack Valente and William Seymour at the Book Depository where they're taking the target practice over the fence, right? So, no, definitely not Jack Ruby in San Francisco. Could it have been Samuel Ruby? I guess, sure. We don't know nothing about Samuel Ruby prior to the assassination itself, right? Assassination happens, and boom, Samuel Ruby's in action, showing up all the places, pretending to be Jack Ruby. All right. Urgent, 11/26/63. From Civil Rights Division. Erwin Horowitz, residence, 6922 Jeffrey, Chicago, Illinois, interviewed at his office, room 1702, 130 North Wells. Advised S.A. Robert Baker that he's the building commissioner of Cook County, Illinois. Furnished information concerning Jack Rubenstein on November 26, 1963 as follows. He knows Jack Rubenstein as Sparky. Last saw him, lost touch with him approximately 15 years ago. Born 1911, same year of birth for Rubenstein. Both lived in the same neighborhood in the vicinity of Peoria Street and Roosevelt Road, and later in an area further west of Roosevelt Road in what became known as the Lawndale area. Described Sparky as likable and personable, but terribly excitable and not stable in temperament. Said Sparky was active physically and prone to engage in arguments, usually about sporting events, and if the argument did not go to his liking, he was liable to use his fists or pick up a stick or any other weapon that came to his immediate attention. He said, in short, that Sparky was quickly moved to violence But when the altercation was over, he immediately returned to his usual likable self. He said that Sparky was always a, quote, hustler, end quote, and a good salesman. He said that he remembers Sparky being present at almost all sporting events, and particularly at the fights which years ago were held at Marigold Gardens in Chicago. He said that Sparky always had tickets to every sporting event, and that as long as he can remember, Sparky scalped tickets to fights, baseball, and football games, etc. He said Sparky never, to his knowledge, stole anything, never carried a gun, nor did he associate with any of the persons from the old neighborhood who later became known in varying degrees as criminals. He recalled one instance that probably occurred when Sparky was age 15, when Sparky attempted to sneak into the Dempsey Tunnel, fight a policeman, and hit him in the head, causing a rather severe injury that required hospitalization. He said that his memory was indistinct, but that he recalled that Sparky had a metal plate installed in his head as a result of this injury. He said that Sparky's older brother, Tiny, is the only person that knows firsthand about this injury. Oh my God. So this is the second person to say that fucking Jack Ruby had a metal plate in his head. Do we have any evidence that Jack Ruby had a metal fucking plate in his head? This could be a big deal. This could be a real big fucking deal. God damn, that's fucking... I'm going to screenshot this. This is... I hate screenshotting things on this computer because my slides, the next set I do, will be put together on my next computer, and like it's just going to fuck with my way of... My feng shui. He stated he considered the Rubenstein family to be persons of good character, and the only one that he knew of other than Sparky was an older brother named Tiny. Was that Earl? Who's no, Earl was younger. Who's Jaime, right? Hyman, whose address is not known to him. He said that he did not know that Rubenstein was even residing in Dallas until he became aware of this through recent news broadcasts. Ralph Kaplan, residence 6214 North Washtenaw, Chicago, interviewed in the office of the building of the commissioners of Cook County, and says he advised S.A. Robert Baker. He grew up in the old Roosevelt Road, Halstead neighborhood, later moving to Lawndale, further west on Roosevelt. He advised that because he was the same age and from the same locality, he knew Jack Rubenstein by his nickname, Sparky. He characterized Rubenstein as likable, gregarious, physically active, unstable, and temperamental, quickly moved to violent action or words. He said that Rubenstein was never criminally inclined nor interested in politics to his knowledge. He said that he was simply a salesman of various products, selling in a style usually referred to as, quote, hustling, end quote, in the Chicago area. He said that he would find it inconceivable to believe that Rubenstein had any criminal connections, and he said that he had no knowledge of Rubenstein's activities since he left the Chicago area a number of years ago. So once again, we have some very contradictory descriptions of Jack Ruby, right? Very contradictory. Is he a hothead? Is he not a hothead? Is he a nice guy? Is he not a nice guy? Is he associated with organized crime? Is he not associated with organized crime? This tells me that we need to do a whole lot more research into Jack's relationship with his brother Samuel, because it seems like Samuel and him had a little bit of an outing when he was removed from the Earl Products Company and forced to sell out his shares, which tells me that Samuel is the more responsible one, even though Sam's younger. And so that, along with all these various descriptions things, the fucking possible steel plate in Jack's head, there's a lot of stuff going on here that indicates to me that there's more to the story of Jack and Samuel Ruby than we know, but even than I know or suspect. So, I mean, Samuel Ruby might have been Jack for most of Jack's life. We just don't know. But, all right, guys, that's going to do it for me today. I am heading out for the weekend. I'm going to see Fish down in Denver, so I'm not going to be doing... Well, maybe I can squeeze in a show sometime. But maybe not. Probably not. So, but worst case, we'll be back on Monday, right? And I hope you really fucking like these Jack Ruby files, because we're going to continue on with them, because I'm liking them. And I'm telling you, the good stuff is going to be buried on page like 1,862, right? This is how it's going to go. It's how research goes. And so if I have to suffer, you have to suffer right along with me. Okay? And so that's it, guys. Please tune in to Bloody History World War II. If you want to get a free copy of my book signed, you can sign up over at Substack for $50. Pay the $50, and I'll send you a free copy of my book. And you'll get my Substack podcast also. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for me, and I will be back on Monday. Thank you.